With a group this size, it seems like a publicity stunt. Not in it for the ink.
We can do so much more. We can save this world. With the right leadership.
Who fact checks the fact checkers? I got the title idea from one of my favourite movies, Watchmen, and the Watchmen were a group of vigilantes that became more powerful than the countries they were protecting. When these characters become too powerful, they're no longer accountable to anyone, and because they put themselves in these positions of power, who's going to stop them? In movies, we tend to focus on physical strength, but in reality, the most powerful characters throughout history have gained that power through sharing ideas and the suppression of contrary ideas. Thankfully, we don't have to worry about big, overpowered blue men, but should we be worried about overpowered blue logos? When we're thinking about overpowered social media companies, we can look at anything from curated Google searches to shadow banning people to illegally selling data. But today I want to focus on their new tool to fight fake news, fact checking. Initially, it was targeted at blatantly false statements, mainly to do with 5G or cooties conspiracies. But pretty quickly it added different tags, including misleading information, disputed claims, and unverified claims. Already I want to point out how vague these can be, particularly the unverified claims. Like, I understand the purpose, and it's fine if we've reached the peak of human knowledge, but we haven't. Therefore, there's plenty of things that still will be unverified and true. The best way to see a problem with this tag is think about Twitter being around for the last 100 years, and imagine all the unverified things they could have put this tag on. Then in October, Twitter released its civic integrity policy, which made the completely unexpected jump from misleading health claims to misleading election claims. This document is fairly big and extremely comforting if you 100% trust that Twitter is and always will be right. Issue is we've moved past disputed facts and are talking about misleading statements, which by their nature are more subjective. And Jack himself admits he will make mistakes and own them when he's caught. Jack does explicitly say below this tweet, "This does not make us an arbiter of truth. Our intention is to connect the dots of conflicting statements and show the information in dispute so people can judge for themselves." My question to that is, do you think people use these fact-checking tags to deep dive into information and get a balanced viewpoint? Or do you think they use them to easily disregard information that challenges their worldview? Fake news can undoubtedly cause problems. The 5G craziness was a good example of this. People were spreading the idea that 5G causes cooties, and then an enormous amount of phone towers were destroyed. Issue was, as the internet historian points out,
how do you tell 5G from the regular Gs?
You strap yourself in and feel the G's!
Answer is they couldn't, and a large amount of 3G and 4G towers were destroyed as well. Workers on the towers were even harassed and shot at, so at this point, I think it's safe to say that fake information can undoubtedly cause real-world problems. Putting fact checks and blocking some of these groups were actions taken, and while I definitely don't disagree with these, I do wonder how effective it is. And surely any discussion of property damage or criminal activity would have been flagged well before false information, as these are against Twitter's policies, not just their fact-checking guidelines. The other issue here is the obvious distrust in conventional media. Ideally, tagging something would lead people to look into it more, but the kind of people who believe that 5G causes cooties see censorship or tags as just a sign that they're onto something. Point here is, regardless of the right course of action, there is undoubtedly real-world consequences to fake information. If it were just a little tag at the bottom of the tweet, then it wouldn't cause many problems. But during the election, most of the tweets that were considered misleading were tagged like this. This tweet was from a TV personality who was trying to explain the Constitution to fellow Republicans. As far as I can tell, nothing he said is incorrect. But regardless, for anyone who didn't want a deep dive, this would be basically hidden from their feeds. Also, interestingly, when you click the tweet, the only correction they make is that some of the votes may still need to be counted, which doesn't seem to contradict his statement and definitely doesn't justify hiding it behind a misleading tag. The first of Donald Trump's tweets to be flagged was the infamous mail-in voting rant. There is no way, zero, that mail-in voting will be anything less than substantially fraudulent. Mailboxes will be robbed, ballots will be forged and even illegally printed out and fraudulently signed. The governor of California is sending ballots to millions of people. Anyone living in the state, no matter who they are or how they got there, will get one. That will be followed by professionals telling all of these people, many of whom have never thought of voting before, how and for whom to vote. This will be a rigged election, no way. Now, officially, the reason it was flagged was because we believe these tweets could confuse voters about what they need to do to receive a ballot and participate in the election. To be fair, Trump does say that everyone will be getting a ballot. There was 21 million ballots sent out, and from what I can see, the voting age population is around 30 million. This means that his tweet could absolutely be seen to possibly confuse voters. So surely the tag will lead directly to resources that show people how to vote correctly, as this was their main concern. However, strangely enough, when you click the link, it takes you directly to this. Trump made unsubstantiated claims that mail-in ballots will lead to voter fraud. These claims are unsubstantiated according to CNN, Washington Post, and others. Now, as I pointed out in my previous video, both the New York Times and the Washington Post have done articles about mail-in voting increasing the chance of voter fraud. So at the very least, it's a contested issue. Why then can Twitter flag these as incorrect, citing companies as the arbiters of truth who internally don't even agree on it? At the very least, it's a topic of debate. However, when concrete claims are made about how secure mail-in voting is, they don't receive the same scrutiny. My question is, what if there is an issue with voting by mail? The President of the United States, who was voted in, can't warn his people about an issue which at the very least is worth looking into without a multi-billion-dollar company flagging him as spreading misinformation. This example is obviously contentious because a lot of people hate Trump, but the fact that a company can silence elected officials is horrifying unless you believe that Twitter is and always will be perfectly neutral, always right, and beyond manipulation. Without even touching on what most of tech companies can do, I think it's pretty safe to say that these blue logos are overpowered. There's 2 points I want to touch on quickly before wrapping up. These are the it's a private company argument and it's an algorithm argument. Yes, it is a private company, but honestly, and this is an opinion, I don't necessarily believe in complete free market capitalism. I think there's plenty of examples where monopolies have been built that have negatively affected the consumer. But these have been for things like light bulbs or diamonds, not monopolies over information distribution. Section 230 is what gives these companies protection from liabilities that publishers face. As they're platforms and they don't editorialize their content, they can't be responsible for what's posted. The issue is this uneditorialized? Particularly when one party was trying to repeal Section 230, meaning the election has an enormous impact on social media companies, not really the neutral bystander you'd want making a civil integrity policy. The other thing you will often hear is that it was an algorithm, as though it was an independent intelligence to put blame on. This is particularly linked to the idea of AI learning, which, while it has the word AI in it, is a long way from artificial intelligence. The AI learning process is where instead of programming a computer, you feed it examples of what you want it to learn and let it extrapolate or refine from there. As you can see, this process is entirely dependent on what information it's fed and who by. In the documentary AlphaGo, we see an AI learning program that's designed to beat a professional Go player. And we see how specific AI is to what it's fed. Firstly, it learns from professional Go players. It doesn't try to play chess. It plays Go. It also almost always plays moves that it's learnt before. In one of the matches, AlphaGo manages to make a new move, and everyone loses their mind.
When I see this move, for me, it's just a big shock.
Interesting stuff. This fifth line shoulder hit.
The idea that an algorithm being responsible somehow negates the responsibility of those who made the algorithm is absolutely crazy. My biggest issue with fact checking isn't the why, because lots of bad things are done for good reasons. You know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions and all that. I want to read all the information and decide what's true. Partly because it makes me more comfortable in my beliefs and makes me more understanding of people I disagree with, but partly because throughout history, any group of people who have suppressed information, usually under the guise of public safety, have ultimately used this power to silence anyone who opposes them. How can we be scared of billion-dollar companies and their capacity to lobby and influence politicians, and not be scared of billion-dollar companies being able to silence or delegitimize them? The answer to a lot of people seems to rest on whether the person being silenced is someone they disagree with or not. But once again, this is placing full confidence in that these giant companies, regardless of where their funding comes from or who takes them over, will always be perfectly aligned with the best interests of everyone. under the umbrella of health and elections, pretty much anything is fair game now. Saying 5G causes cooties will get you flagged, but how long until legitimate but controversial medical information gets the same treatment? I think I know enough to say I don't know shit. Things are complicated. There's virologists who don't know anything about economics. There's engineers who don't know anything about history. And personally, I just don't trust that these journalists and computer programmers know everything. I really don't think that these giant companies need any more power. And I truly think the best way to combat bad ideas is through civil conversation and the spreading of good ideas. Anyway, I think I'll wrap it up there, but thank you to anyone who watched to the end, and a big thank you to all the people who subscribed off my last video. If you like this one, please click like and subscribe below. Cheers.